You know, it's interesting. When we get to this particular trail, Trail 6, we're going to talk about instincts, and I can't go very far down this road without thinking about my instincts when I was a teenager and I was dating. I was wanting to be involved in a relationship with a person of the opposite gender for a pretty long time, but right about my junior year in high school, maybe even into my senior year, all of a sudden, man, those instincts were so very, very focused because it was focused on Gwen. Now, Gwen, in order for you to understand this, is Gwen in my 6th grade year of school was in my school. Her name was Wendy at the time. It was Wendy. And then she went off to Japan or Korea or someplace for 6 years. And when she returned, it was my senior year. She was no longer Wendy. She was Gwen. Now, I had a crush on Wendy when I was in 6th grade, when I was just crushing out. You know what that is? But now when she returns, the girl of my dreams has now returned into my life, and her name has gone from Wendy to Gwen. Blonde hair, beautiful girl, just, man, she came and into school, and I got to know her, took her out on a date. I had done that an awful lot in females' lives. Actually took her home after the date that evening and kissed the girl of my dreams on the lips after 6 years of waiting. My desire was strong. The problem is this. The next night, I was on a hayride with another girl. It's a whole other problem. And I meet the girl who is now my wife. And suddenly when Lynn fell on me on this hayride, and I see her for the first time. Actually, the first thing I said to her was, "My name's Keith, and I love you. I'm an extremely good romantic guy." She said, I looked at her, and my instincts were, Gwen who? My instincts were, whatever that 6-year thing, it just got knocked away when I met Lynn. I got her phone number, called her the next morning and said, "Hey, I haven't been able to sleep all night." She said, "You know, that's interesting. I slept just fine." Jerk. And I said, "I need to see you." She goes, "I have a date." I said, "Break it. It'll be worth it." She did, and kind of history. Now, the instinct that's driving me at that particular point is an instinct that really desires a relationship, but it's so convoluted with this instinct about sexuality that, to be honest with you, I'm about 90% of my instinct is off here. Now, I'm right in my longing. I'm right in the desire. I'm sitting there going, this is the girl for me, and that's part of it, partly right, but the rest of it is still so convoluted to me. I think that's the problem. I think the biggest problem that we have as guys, when it comes to our instincts, is that there is a good and a bad part to our instincts, and every instinct we have. And if it's mishandled, it has this problem, and if it handles correctly, it goes this way. And for me, I had these instincts, but I was mishandling them. Our job here today is to say, hey, your instincts are good. I mean, it's important for us to go, whoa, I got to be careful here. But our job is to heighten that instinct, to take it up a notch, to see what it's like to go, okay, I see that there's some arrows coming my way, but you add fire to them? Now, to be honest with you, an arrow's going to do what it's going to do, with or without fire. Pretty much your blood will put the fire out. The problem is that when you see it, it causes your instinct to get a little bit heightened. I want you to get your instincts heightened. I want you to understand the difference between when they're balanced and when they're not balanced. Now, we've been dealing with understanding who we are, and today we're going to take another shift. We're going to take a look at this. Taking the good and making it bad. I think we want to take a look about this particular trail, Trail 6, is the idea of saying, I'm going to take what I've come from, what I have naturally, and I'm either going to do something positive with it, or like many of us as guys, we'll do something negative with it. But the instinct is part of our bodies. It's part of, if you take a look at your core, there's your body, and your body has within it, along with its genetics and along with its brain that thinks and feels, you know, that whole thing of that balance that we talked about on Trail 2. This is part of your body, your instincts. Now, if you don't handle them well, they become bad. So we often take that which is good and make it bad. Listen to this statement. The second aspect of the internal war within each man is related to the nature of the various instincts. Instincts were given as part of a man's giftedness, but can become imbalanced or misused due to spandex decisions. Everything about this is the spandex kind of world. And I think that's where I get a little nervous. I get nervous because my spandex side, my shadow side, the part of me that makes decisions, when I go off the imbalance of my instincts, creates all kinds of problems. Now, we're going to look at 3 instincts this trail. We'll look at 3 instincts on the next trail. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to look at what we call the kryptonite of a man. And that's his sexual instinct. And that was part of my problem. I have this one instinct, and I keep getting it confused with other instincts and just never kept it in balance at that particular point in my life. There's a movie that I want us to think in terms of, and it's a movie that, if you haven't seen it, it's kind of a rough-edged movie. It's an apocalyptic movie. I don't really do apocalyptic movies very much. It's called The Book of Eli. Now, The Book of Eli is a fascinating movie because what is flaming behind me is all that culture at this point knows. Basically, spandex males rule the world as we know it. There's a guy played by Denzel Washington called Eli, and he has this book, and it's all about the Book of Eli. And to spoil it a little bit, the book is the Bible. That's the last copy that anybody knows exists. And so it's his kind of involvement with that book. He enters this world of this guy by the name of Carnegie. Carnegie is the evil guy. And if you can have an evil guy in an evil world, this guy's at the pinnacle of it. But he's very, very good at gathering people around him. So he's creating a culture which he rules in, all surrounding it with this well of water. And his evilness sort of dominates it. Eli walks into that world. And when he walks into that world, he's walking in as an unbelievably good warrior. He has learned to survive. And we'll find out a little bit as the movie moves on as to why he does. As he arrives here, he'll meet Carnegie. Carnegie has a wife named Claudia, and who's blind, and then they have a daughter named Solera. So I want you to consider this particular scene. What happens at this point is that Eli is now wanted to leave. He's getting batteries recharged for an item that he has. And this is in a world where there's not much of anything, so everything costs whatever you can trade and barter. And so he's been invited by Carnegie because he seems to be a man of great understanding and wisdom and a great warrior because he's always taken out some guys. And Carnegie invites him to spend the night. To Claudia's great objection, Carnegie sends Claudia's his daughter, in to have sexual relationships with Eli. Eli's a different kind of man. He doesn't play by that culture's rules, and he says no to her. He's not open to that. She doesn't want to be there. Her mother doesn't want her to be there. Just Carnegie's trying to seduce Eli into staying with him. She comes in with some food, and he turns her down. But interestingly enough, she says, well, I can't leave. If I leave, he'll know, and then I'll be in trouble. And so he says, okay, stay, and he offers her some of his food. He says, there's plenty of it here. She had never had anybody share with her at all. He shares his food with her, and as he's sharing it with her, she goes to eat, and he grabs her hand and says, wait a minute. And then he prays. She had never heard anybody pray. He thanked God for this food. And he thanked God for the gift of companionship. She looked up at him. She had never seen anything like it. It was like a whole new world was taking the instincts that she had lived under and sort of swung it around to where it was all of a sudden in a positive light. As that scene ends, it causes us to think in terms of this. That remember that moment at the table? They're both holding hands. They're praying. And he says to her, thank God for the gift of companionship. You see, he gets this gift that we call bonding, the desire to have a connection with another human being. Let's consider that. Roman numeral 1 in your books. Roman numeral 1. It says this, the instinct to bond with others. We have this instinct. It's to bond with others. It's natural. It's what causes us to move in groups and packs all around the world. That's what happens. It's an instinct to bond with others. When that instinct is well guided, number 1, it provides a desire for interpersonal connections and relationships. So when it's well guided, it's going to give you a desire to be connecting with people. Connecting in verbal ways, in physical ways, with touch and everything else. It's going to cause you to want to connect. Now here's some of the things when it's happening well, when that connection's going well. Look at this. Life's lessons can be observed and learned. That's what will happen if you do this. Life lessons can be observed and learned. How am I going to learn? I'm going to learn in a group. I'm going to learn in a family structure. My children learn from me. I learn from my parents. My parents learn from their parents. There's that kind of a community thing that happens both in a family and on a larger scale with what we would call tribe in the forest, where you have this larger involvement. What we do is we keep learning by relationships, by connection. There's another thing we do with this instinct when it's happening well, when it's well guided. It gives us companionship can be experienced. If you don't write down that word companionship, it's really important because companionship takes you to the next level. It's not just that, hey, I need two to survive. There's a sort of a give and take. There's this, I enjoy my time with you. Companionship is so important. That's why, guys, this is why I really like the idea of us learning not just to have female friends or people of the opposite sex, but have male friends. Because one of the things about that is there are things I can learn from Lynn and her perspective and all that she is, but there's also things I learned from some of the key guys in my life that speak into my life. That companionship. Look at the next one. When an instinct is guided well, it provides a desire and interpersonal connections and relationships so that teamwork can be experienced and larger life tasks accomplished. In other words, if I wanted to go build a house, I need a teamwork. I can't build a house on my own. I can. It's going to take a long time. But I get a bunch of guys, all of a sudden now we can raise the beams together, we can do different skill levels that different people have, and together, collectively, we can create a greater goal. That's what bonding does. You try to do things alone, and you end up in trouble. You end up in trouble both in decisions you make, but also just in survival. In fact, if you are in a survival setting, and Lynn and I were in a survival setting, let's say that Lynn and I were in that, we're going to survive much better because she's there. I'm sort of like, oh my goodness, we're going to die. We're out here in the middle of nowhere. She's eating bark off of trees. She can do all that because she has it together. She has it really together. I need that aspect of who she is. It's who you and I need when we're involved in teamwork. It's going to take it to the next level. There's giftedness involved. There's many hands make light work, that kind of thing. Look at the next one. When you have these connections and relationships so that physical resources can be offered. What happens is we're going to share resources. So I'm going to have more resources available because I have a relationship. Without relationship, there's less resources available. So in other words, when I plant a crop, it takes me a lot of work to clear a field, to do all that work. The reality is if I have many people doing that, we'll clear a much bigger field, create much more crop, and we will survive much better. Also works that way in the work world. It works that way in just about every part of our lives. Another part of bonding. When we have these connections and relationships, they cause less than wise choices which can be confronted. If you keep doing the same stupid thing over and over again and keep hurting yourself the same way, the confrontation of these poor choices can be done in this group relationship. I don't think any area of this bonding is seen clearer in our culture than in marriage. There's a lot of reasons why I tell people not to live together. There's a whole bunch of reasons. I think, number one, the lack of commitment. And when sexuality is taking place and you're not committed to one another, I think it just kind of messes with it. And we're actually going to talk about that in 2 weeks when we talk about kryptonite. But there's a lot of other reasons why I think living together is a scary proposition in a marital, what we would call a marital type of relationship, and not living together. And the reason really is that the lack of commitment will cause us to run a little bit more often. You have other instincts besides bonding, right? And that causes us to run when we don't have that commitment to say, through thick and thin, we're going to do this. So let me give you something. Now, this is going to be completely different. It's not going to be in your notes anywhere. I want you to go to like page 36 in your workbooks there, and you'll find blank pages there. I want you to write down 2 columns. You're going to write on one side of the column, it'll be female. The other side will be male. And this is about what a female's longing for in a relationship and what a male's longing for in a relationship. And when you come together in a marriage with these things in place, I believe the relationship becomes much healthier. But you need to understand that we are equal but not the same. Right? Men and women are equal, but they're not the same. So we're going to walk through this. So taking that page, on the left side, we're going to walk down what a female longs for. A female longs for companionship. What we've been talking about, this desire to connect. Guess what men long for? Same thing, desire to connect. What do you think caused me to remember Gwen for 6 years? What do you think may cause me to forget Gwen when I met Lynn? It's all about this longing for a companion, for a relationship. I was thinking a long-term with Gwen. I thought about her for 6 years, right? When I met Lynn, I forgot about Gwen, and I started thinking about Lynn, and 5 years later, we're married. I think that's the process, the journey, the thing that we understand of companionship. Both men and women need that. But that's where our similarity ends. A woman needs security. A woman needs to feel safe. She has this longing to feel like, okay, who she is and what she is works much better. A man longs for admiration. My job is to make Lynn feel safe. Her job is to make me feel like great protector who saved her. I mean, it's, you ever wonder that, as us as guys, probably would never lock a door. You know, we don't care if an animal comes in. If a guy comes in, we'll beat him up, whatever it is. No, but we lock doors because women need to feel safe. What we love, though, is when she goes, "Ooh, you make me feel so safe by locking that door." And now all of a sudden, we feel admired. Men long to be admired. Women long to feel safe. Look at the third thing that women long for. Women long for significance. Women long for significance. They need to know what they do has worth, has value. It's significant. And part of the reason is they can do two things that we can't do. Women can give birth, give life. We can't do that. And two, women can nurture. Men don't nurture. We say, get up, you're bleeding. Yeah, put a leaf over it, you'll be fine. We treat it very differently. Women nurture. Women can take long-term nurturing, men kind of short-term in that area. As a result of that, it kind of leaves us a little bit of vulnerability. What a woman longs for is significance, is to say, child rearing takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. And how do I know that it's worth it? Well, because what you're doing is significant. And significant comes primarily from a man speaking into a woman's heart as to how valuable. For Lynn, I'm her Secret Service agent. She's the president. For me, of all the parapets out of all the castles in all the world, I picked hers because she's the wow factor. To this day, 35 years into marriage, she's my wow factor, going on 36 real soon. What a man needs is a little bit different, though. We need support. We need to feel like we're supported. We need to feel like she's come alongside and helped us. So we're going to make her feel significant. She's going to make us feel supported, as if what we're doing has worth and value as well. But it comes more from the, how can I help you? Actually, the word is used when Eve was made, even though she's the height of creation, the most important thing God makes, the last thing he makes is the woman. He says that I will make a helpmeet, somebody who will come alongside and support the guy. Support the guy in what? Well, I'm actually protecting her. It's kind of a cool deal. But what happens is a guy feels, when he feels supported, Ben, makes all the difference in the world. A lot of guys who become unfaithful to their mates, when it's not at the normal time when guys become unfaithful, and there's certain times when guys tend to go that because of some different phases of their life. A lot of times it's when they don't feel supported. And all of a sudden somebody at work makes them feel supported. Somebody from their past makes them feel supported. It makes them feel sort of like, okay, that's sort of where it begins to have a different kind of relationship. Support, significance. A woman, by the way, seeks a relationship when she doesn't feel significant. There's one other area, though, and that's the whole area of response to one another. A woman has an emotional need. Her responses are emotional responses. Ours are physical responses. A woman has an emotional response. A man has a physical response, a sexual response. And so what my wife longs for is to feel valued. She longs to emotionally feel secure. She longs to emotionally feel okay. If Lynn sees a cat get hit by a car, Lynn is kind of be emotionally out for about 2 weeks. You know, every time I go, hey, baby, she'll go, oh, that poor cat got smashed by the car. It was ugly. That's her, okay? Me, if I see a group of kindergartners in a bus go off a cliff, I'm good in 10 minutes. Now, what is the difference in that? And not just I'm cruel, we got kindergartners. It's the fact that I'm wired for physical response. Lynn's wired for emotional response. When you understand that, my job is to do this. Now watch. Take this sheet that you've just been working on. Put your hand on the right-hand side, the column that says man. Everything on the left hand is your job. Everything on the left-hand side, all that is her, is your job. You say, well, what about everything over here that I need? You work on that side of the ledger. Guarantee that sooner or later this side of the ledger will be covered. It's never about us, right? We're the Secret Service agent. She's the president. Don't make it about you. Put your hand over that side. That's when bonding's going well. What happens when bonding doesn't go well? Look at Roman numeral number 2. Roman numeral number 2. The instinct to bond with others. When, number 2, underneath this, I'm still in Roman numeral 1, excuse me. The instinct to bond with others. When the instinct is not well balanced, the bonding instinct can negatively impact the man by. So when I am bonding with others and it's not well balanced, here's the negative impact it's going to have. Consider this one. Attaching to the wrong people who can influence the man. When I don't have this right, I will tend to connect with people that are not good for me. Some of you guys, you're on your third marriage. It's amazing the similarities of the things you've run after. As a matter of fact, sometimes we've married people that remind us of our parents. Sometimes we marry people that are the exact opposite of our parents, so we can stay away from that. There's all kinds of things that kind of get connected here, and if your balance, your bonding instinct gets messed up, you're going to start to attach to the wrong people. If you're hanging out with the wrong crowd, and they're constantly tearing you down. They're not knights, they're spandex males. That's your bonding instincts out of balance. Look at the next one. When your bonding instinct gets out of balance, you develop tendencies to blame others instead of taking responsibilities for one's own potential. We tend to blame others. Now, underline that word blame. Blame is a big thing for guys. We tend to feel like it's not my fault. Remember we talked about that when it came to the shadow? What happens for us is we think that it must be somebody else's fault because I've bonded with the wrong people. It's your fault. You've made choices to bond with people that are just unwise. Now, let's say you've bonded with the wrong woman. I'm not saying you end that marriage. No. You start meeting the needs on that side of the ledger. But you also have to be careful. Sometimes in your life, some of you guys that have struggled with your past, let's say you've struggled a lot with just drinking too much, but your dad drinks too much. Sometimes you have to be careful about connecting back into that. Sometimes you hang around with people that are doing the exact same foolish things that you do over and over again. If everybody are players in the sexual world and you hang out with that, you're going to tend to do that. Now, you don't blame them for what you do. You just start choosing differently who you bond with. Bonding out of control, bonding unwisely, bonding imbalance has tremendous consequences. Look at the next one. If that instinct is going to impact you in a negative way when you're failing to recognize the needs of others in one's life. There's a selfness that's going to come when you bond incorrectly. You're going to miss the needs of others. Underline it, write it, experience it. Others' needs are what you're about. So when you bond, and you bond for you, it's all about you, and your instinct is to take care of you in this, you start to lose what a knight's calling is. A knight's calling is always for the improvement of himself, the world around him, and certainly the person they're bonding with. That's the desire. That's what God does with us. That's what we long to do with one another. Look at the last one. When the instinct is not well balanced, the bonding instinct can negatively impact the man by creating a partial bond that concentrates on one's attribute of the other individual without seeing the whole person. What will happen is you're going to lose the whole person. You're going to only look at what it is that they can give to me, right? The thing that's so fascinating about Lynn, she loves to backpack. I like hotels. She could sleep out, and she did. I mean, she went on a 7-day solo in the Colorado Rockies. I really like the Colorado Rockies from a bed and breakfast overlooking the mountains from afar. You know, that's sort of who we are. You know what's really fun? I have climbed mountains. I've gone hiking. I think I've even slept out in the woods once. And why? Well, because I've actually learned to appreciate what she appreciates. She's also learned to appreciate me. Because when we get done hiking a mountain, we go back to the bed and breakfast and get a massage so we can just, get those muscles back and work after she beat me up all that time. There's a side to us that we kind of learn to appreciate. Now, I know Lynn and I are backwards from the average one of you, but the reality is learning the whole person. When you miss the whole person and you keep making them into your image, it gets all messed up. That's one issue. It's the issue of bonding. As we think about the other one, let me tell you about a warrior by the name of Sam Houston. Sam Houston, if you've ever heard the name, it's Houston, Texas. I mean, he was the governor, president of Texas, governor before he became a state. He was a governor of 2 states, actually. I think it was Arkansas and Texas. Sam Houston was an interesting guy. His dad died when he was 14. By the time he was 16, he ran away from home. He got involved with a tribe of Indians, about 300 of them, and really actually became pretty bad alcoholic, and was always just a wild kid, just doing all kinds of things. Married 3 times. By his 3rd marriage, he kind of put together that it was the abuse of alcohol and just his wild living that was creating all the problems. And at that point, he turned his life around. Things began to change for him. Probably the most thing you know Sam Houston for, however, is how he defeated Santa Anna. Santa Anna was the Mexican leader, the general who had attacked and did that thing that we call the Alamo, when 5,000 crack troops of Santa Anna attacked. Now, at that point, Sam Houston had his team of soldiers well. He had learned well over the years of his military experience. He was a leader at this point. Everything was functioning pretty well in his life. He had learned not to just react. He learned to control his instincts. And so when his 400 men said, let's go take on Santa Anna, he goes, no way, we'll be slaughtered. He has an instinct that's clicking in. We'll talk about that instinct to self-preserve that he's dealing with. But what he decides to do is decides to lead instinct under control. His army will grow to 900 as he resists fighting Santa Anna, but Santa Anna will chase him. At a certain point, after trying to catch him, Santa Anna will split his army to try to trap him. At that particular point, Sam Houston realizes he can make the move. He waits till just the right day, the right time, and the right time of day, which is a siesta time, and at 4:30 in the afternoon attacks. One half of Santa Anna's army. In a short, less than an hour experience, 1,250 of Santa Anna men will be dead. Six from Sam Houston will be dead. Santa Anna will be captured. And that reign of terror on what was then being the development of Texas was over. I want to throw a quote up there on the screen for you that was given by Sam Houston's great-great-granddaughter about him. It says this: a lot of people had sight, but few had vision. A lot of people had sight at that time, but few had vision. You know what that is? It's the difference between an instinct in balance and out of balance. Let's look at that instinct that Sam Houston demonstrated. See, he called the instinct to self-preserve. Roman numeral 2. I was trying to get to it earlier. Here we are. The instinct of self-preservation. This is the desire to survive. It's a very, very important instinct. So you know that if you mishandle the instinct to bond, you make that a non-important issue, things like abortion take place. Because I don't want to necessarily be saddled with the child, so I abort that child. I don't want to have that desire for that life to be connected with me. Or desertions, where fathers don't take care of their children. And I know some of you are struggling with that right now. You have kids, and you're not being responsible for them. You are a sperm donor, but you're not a life donor. You're not giving into... Well, that instinct to bond, I need you to understand something. It won't go, even though you and I fail to bond correctly, that instinct to self-preserve will still exist. Babies fight to live even after abortion attempts. They do. Kids that are deserted fight to live. Everything gets messed up. You know all the damage that comes out of that, right? But it's self-preservation. The problem is when we don't pour into it correctly, it gets out of balance. Let's look at it what's like in balance. If it's in balance, when instinct is balanced, first one, gets one to the gym several times a week. When it's in balance, self-preservation means you're going to take care of yourself. I get to the gym all the time. I just found out recently that apparently you're supposed to use the equipment in the gym. I had no idea. I just thought you get to the gym. I'm at the gym. This is pretty cool. Talked to a few people and leave, but now apparently you have to use the equipment. Exercise is huge. Guys, if you want to self-preserve, you're going to have to make sure you take care of your body. You're going to have to push your body a little bit. And the older you get, guys, the more you need to do that. You need to be aware of that area. Look at the next one. A man who wants to self-preserve encourages one to follow traffic laws. Okay, follow traffic laws. I was talking to one of our team on Knights of the 21st Century, Kyle, and he actually followed me to a location. He goes, "You tell me you drive fast, dude. You're like nothing." So I all of a sudden thought, man, I want to follow him sometime, because whatever speed limit he's able to live by, I want to live by that one too, because I'm about a 6 mile an hour over the speed limit guy. Sorry, police officers. Because I've realized you don't get stopped at that level. Obeying traffic laws are not just your speed laws, though. Guys, stop signs. Guys, putting seatbelts on. Those are things. Some states have laws for motorcycle riders with helmets and some without. I have a friend of mine who had gotten injured in a motorcycle accident years ago, decided he would never wear a helmet because if he ever had another accident, he'd just rather die. Well, he had another accident and did a tremendous amount of damage to his face and his side of his skull. Now, he survived. But, guys, you just got to make some wise choices. I mean, along the way, you have to make decisions about how you're going to obey the law around us that will preserve you. Look at the next one. Inspires periodic doctor visits, especially when pain exists. So when you're in pain, you go see a doctor. You go see a doctor as a way of life. You're going to be checking this out. Why? Self-preservation. Look at the next one. Supports saying no to poor spending habits. You're gonna be careful about what you spend. You have limited resources. Self-preservation says I got to be careful in this area. So you put the credit card away. You cut it up. You do what you need to do. If you find yourself buying that which you want more than that which you need, or more buying that which you can't afford more than that which you can. It's part of self-preservation. And by the way, guys, all kinds of pressure comes into your physical being when you're under stress, and stress comes from financial problems all over the place. Look at the next one. Helps to hold one's tongue with others, including family. Self-preservation, guys, you that have older brothers, you know how important it is to hold your tongue. You that have fathers with quick triggers, you know how important it was to hold your tongue. Learn to hold your tongue regarding people. You learn to hold your tongue regarding relationships. A man that learns to self-preserve is very wise in the words he uses. Look at the next one. Causes one to listen to parents when young. Now, I know some of you have had bad parents. I know some of you have parents that have deserted you. I think some of you have even had what I would call evil parents. But to be really honest with you, it's pretty rare to meet an evil parent, especially a mother. They're trying to help. They might not know how to help. They might have all kinds of wounds and stuff, and we'll talk about that trails from now. But the reality is that when you look at your parents, for the most part, every parent that I meet are trying their best to take care of you. Now, in the news, we have all the horror stories of when a parent doesn't. But guys, for the most part, wise man learns to do that. That's what self-preservation is. Look at the next one. Encourage one to go to work and pay the bills. Encourage a guy, underline that, go to work. I meet a couple guys every once in a while that says, yeah, I don't know why we have to work. Well, because you have to pay the bills. Yeah, well, that's somebody else's problem. Let the government do it, let my wife do it, let somebody else do it, but I'm not going to do it. Let my parents do it. That's why some guys are still living at home at 42. Yeah. Got to be careful there. Right? It's that whole area. If you're going to self-preserve, you'll learn to take care of yourself. Look at the last one. Reminds one to check a second time if the situation is potentially dangerous. Reminds you to check a second time if where you are is in a dangerous world. Guys, we are fearless by nature. We are risk takers by nature. And guys, if you want to live longer, be wise. I do some work in my shop and have a number of power tools, and there's certain tools there that I have to be very, very careful with because I appreciate the appendages that I have. And what happens is if you're not taking advantage of the safety checks, all kinds of issues take place. You got to be wise in this area. Now, what happens when we get out of balance? What happens if that instinct is imbalanced? The instinct of self-preservation, when the instinct is imbalanced, here's what it's going to do. It's going to view most relationships from a selfish perspective. Most of our relationships are going to go selfish when we're out of balance. Got to be very careful with this. Now, I'm going to kind of walk through these because you're going to find some similarities to some of the things we've been talking about, shadows. Narcissistically expects that one's personal needs should come first. It becomes all about you, all about your personal needs. You're out of balance when self-preservation is all about me. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's all about me and what I want. It's what spandex males live by. It's a world that surrounds them. Be very careful in this one. Next one. It's unable to respect people with different viewpoints. You and I, when our instincts are out of balance, we just do not value what other people have to say. And you know what? Other viewpoints are valuable. Other life stages are valuable. Other ethnic backgrounds are valuable. Other life experiences are valuable. We need to take advantage of that. Guys, we just can't ignore it. We become very unwise when we live in that world. Look at the next one. We become self-absorbed and creating an inability to listen to the deep needs of others. What happens is this, guys. It's all about us. We're not listening to the deep needs of others. I think sometimes that's what overwhelms me as knights. If we look at the kingdom as that which feeds us, instead of us which feeds the kingdom, man, it gets so backwards. Self-preservation is not designed for you to go selfish. When it's out of balance, it refuses to initiate responsible risks to succeed. You know, if we take too many risks, sometimes, guys, we don't take enough risks. So what happens is you're so interested in self-preserving that you never step into what you're called to do. In a few trails from now, we're going to talk about your specific calling, your specific reason for being alive, and it's going to involve you breaking some of the inertia that you're in and moving forward. Self-preservation, when it's out of balance, will cause you to fight in that area. Look at the next one. Denies one's failure and does not allow for growth from one's own imperfections. When you and I have the chance to learn from our mistakes, guys, don't deny your failure. It's there. Underline it. Write about it. Circle it. Failure. When you have it, you failed. Learn from it. Otherwise, pain was wasted. The last one in self-preservation. Remain unwilling to reach complex objectives through teamwork. All of a sudden, you and I, because it's all about us, don't bond anymore. We don't get involved in what we need to be doing, making all the difference in the world. In your nightly news that's there in front of you, there's a kind of this cool story that's going on about a guy by the name of Onesimus. Now, you wouldn't know it because the guy we're going to talk about is Philemon, but Onesimus is a slave who is run away. And as Onesimus runs away, he runs away from his master. He meets a guy by the name of Paul, who ends up writing a significant portion of what we call the New Testament in the Bible. He meets Paul in prison. Paul brings him into a relationship with Christ, and then Onesimus becomes this amazing man. Paul is sending that man back to Philemon, his slave master. Now that's in a culture where if you run away from your slave master has the right to kill you. He will hunt you down, find you, and execute you. So it was to keep slaves from obviously running away. Paul is now sending this man, who has now become very profitable in Paul's life, back to Philemon. And so when you look at Onesimus, this guy, you look at a man who has had the instinct to flee. I'm a slave, I don't want to be a slave anymore, and he runs. Now, Paul's pushing against his instinct to self-preserve because he sends them back to Philemon. Philemon's a believer in Christ. Philemon is a guy that Paul had led to Christ. Philemon was a man who was changed by Christ. So Paul feels that he's sending Onesimus back to a good place. Now not as a slave, but as somebody who could be helpful to him. Listen to this quote. I'm going to put it up on the screen for you. It's this quote that Paul has from Philemon 17. There are no chapters in the book of Philemon, just one chapter. So if you consider me your partner, welcome him as you would welcome me. This instinct that he has to flee is dealt with right up front. The instinct is now saying, because I have another guy that's coming alongside of me, bonding, self-preservation, all being worked in proper order, Philemon comes back. Onesimus comes back to Philemon and corrects that wrong. Let's look at that instinct to flee. We're going to fly through this. Watch these. The instinct to flee. 1. When the instinct is balanced, it recognizes physical dangers that are harmful. You're going to recognize the arrows are lit. They're being fired at me. There's fire coming at me. It's wise to not get hit by fiery arrows. Not a bad thing. Instinct to flee. Cultural influences will corrupt one's internal world. What will happen is this. If it's balanced, you'll recognize that the things that are trying to change me, I won't let it change me. I won't get sold a bill of goods. You're going to deal with the fact that you can move forward, not just get caught up in what everybody else is doing. Next one. The instinct to flee. When the instinct is balanced, it recognizes relationships that are detrimental in which to be involved. Already mentioned our dads. I already mentioned going back to certain things in the past. You got to be careful where you go. Instinct to flee is a good one. There are times to flee. Instinct to flee is balanced when it recognizes actions that are unhealthy and destructive. When your action is unhealthy and destructive and you recognize it, that's a good instinct. For me, guys, I don't know whether you know my story, but I was, if you were a squire, you know that I struggled with pornography from the age of 12 to 27. I would actually call it an addiction. Now, I know you guys that have struggled with addictions, you may or may not agree with that terminology in my story, but for 15 years I had no idea how to get free from it. I have learned to flee certain things. I go to a hotel room, especially when I was first getting free and I was traveling a lot, I would go to a hotel room and change what I could watch on my TV by calling down to the front desk. Why? I just couldn't afford to be involved back into pornography. I've learned to avoid certain stores. I've learned to avoid internet surfing. I've learned to do certain things that have changed for me because that's how I flee some of the things from our past. So I've learned actions that are unhealthy and destructive. Look at the next one. When the instinct is balanced, it recognizes thoughts that are not in keeping with one's values. When the thought, this is not any longer keeping it in your value. You know, it's interesting that some of you guys struggle with addiction to gambling, and you struggle a lot with that, and you don't know how to run away from the actions, but if you stop for a few moments and you think, I keep making the same mistake over and over again, I think I'm going to make money this time, and it's like, wait a minute, stop and think. Your values are telling you that's not the way it works. That's not the way you get ahead. It isn't about winning the lottery. It isn't about this time it's going to come through. And be so careful in this instinct. Use that instinct. It'll help you a lot. Last one. When the instinct is balanced, it recognizes emotions that threaten to jump one's guidance fences. You recognize things that are going to take you over the edge of what you should be and do. Now, here's what happens to the instinct to flee when it's imbalanced. And I'm going to literally just fly through these, so just get ready to write, guys. When it's imbalanced, it never faces enough difficulty to allow one to grow. You're never going to have this opportunity to grow if it's not balanced. Fleeing is what allows you to survive and bond. Fails to protect the hearts of those one leads. If you don't learn when to pull back, you're going to put yourself in danger and them in danger all the time. Next, causes the loss of one's integrity by choosing not to stand up to deceptive practices. When the wrong is popular and you don't stand against it, you lose your integrity. You've got to be extremely careful here. The instinct is imbalanced when it refuses feedback that is necessary for change. You will miss your target every time if you don't get feedback back. You're flying to the moon. If you're not getting feedback back or whether or not you're on target, you will miss the moon by thousands and thousands of miles. You and I need to get that feedback. We need to dismiss self-care by putting other things ahead of self-validation. Take care of self-care by putting other things ahead of self-validation. Next one. Fails to be willing to create tension through a difference of opinion. You need to be willing to push the limits. When you're at work, you need to be pushing things so that difference of opinion can be expressed. Otherwise, you get sucked into it. Okay, learning to flee. Avoids responsibility by not creating goals nor plans necessary to achieve them. We're going to deal with that directly when it comes to your knights list that you're going to have when you do your knighthood plan at the end. All right. Roman number 4. For the knight to be victorious in the present cultural war, he must win the first war within himself. Remember, these are always wars within us. By balancing his instinct to succeed and accept the vital importance of positive relationships with others as he enters each life stage. He needs to balance all of these things by understanding the relationships are so huge. So your instincts, when in balance, will be good for you. You'll flee at the right times, you'll self-preserve at the right time, and you'll bond with who you need to bond to. When it's all happening, those things work very, very well. You have to deal with this. Number 2, accepting his need for self-care, understanding that such self-valuing assists his personal development. You're going to have to take care of your self-preservation, right? Bonding, self-preservation. Look at the next one. 3, giving himself permission to set boundaries which allow him to leave behind detrimental relationships and situations. You're going to have the opportunity. That's what fleeing is. I have to set boundaries. I can't do this. I got to get over here. You need to learn to set boundaries. Now you bring all that together and look at number 4. Number 4 says seeking spiritual guidance and power. You cannot beat your instincts and get them in balance just naturally. They're instincts under the influence of the shadow. So you're going to have to get this power from God. You have to do this connection with him. Let that power come. As you know, obviously it's through Christ. Now, the last one. You're going to need to return next week, get together next time you guys get together on trail number 7, and we're going to talk about 3 more instincts that can help guide your way. I want to talk, and thanks for letting me fly, guys. I want to talk about one more part of the movie Book of Eli. The Book of Eli has a fascinating ending to it. If you don't do violence, it's a tough movie. There's a lot of stuff in it that's just kind of overwhelming. But there's a scene when Eli is now run away from Carnegie and all of his evil. Solera has come with him, this girl that is the daughter of Claudia, and she has come with him, having heard his prayer, so fascinated by his words and this book he carries, that she's with him. There's going to be this moment when they're sort of hiding in an old abandoned cooling tower from a nuclear plant. And as they're there, this scene takes place. She asks him, "What are you listening to? What are you listening to?" And he tells her that he's listening to something that he listens to every day. And she goes, "Well, what?" And he goes, "Well, let me show you." And she asks to see the book. And what he's listening to is actually the words of the book. And as he was doing it, he starts showing her the book. He says, "Can you read it to me?" She can't read. And so he begins to quote the 23rd Psalm. Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And she goes, did you write that? And he goes, yeah. And then, no, I didn't really write it. And she's just so enamored by this whole experience. And in this moment, as they're having this encounter, she discovers why his character is so different, because she hears his story about how he heard this voice inside of him, this deep calling that says, go find this book. And he finds this book and then keep it and take it to the certain place going north. And as he does this, he talks about how his instincts have been true to him, how that whoever's called him and he believes it's God has been preserving his life and is knowing when to flee and knowing who to bond with. And here she is with him, the first person in the whole journey he's been able to bond with. And it gets to that moment where he goes, you know what? I can't tell you what to or not to believe regarding my experience, but I can tell you that it's gotten me this far for this long. At that point in the scene, what it's done is it's combined the two. It's combined the power of God with the instincts that he's placed within us. When they come together, you and I will do what we were designed to do. Dealing with our instincts. That's what it's all about. We're going to deal with 3 more next week. See you then.